Kofi Annan once said, arguing against globalization is like arguing against the laws of gravity.
The reason we have gravity, the reason we're stuck to this planet, is because the mass of the Earth is so great. So, the more mass something has, the laws of gravity tell us, the better we're able to bring things closer together. Things closer together. Things closer together.
Like Dr. Scoville said, gravity is the inevitable force that attracts anything with mass towards the center of the Earth. The same way in which globalization is a force that integrates economies, societies, and cultures. Both are completely natural and unavoidable processes that impact and alter this Earth significantly. However, unlike gravity, globalization has the potential to connect all aspects of the world, forcing it to shrink into one yet cohesive platform. The world was once an enormous empty place where contact and communication was exhausting and strenuous as one journeyed for miles at a time through a forest or desert. Thomas Friedman in The World is Flat described how the world went from a medium to a size small, from globalization 2.0 to globalization 3.0. Globalization, put into simple terms, is the interweaving of markets, technology, information systems, and telecommunication networks in a way that is shrinking the world from a size medium to a size small. Thus, this permitted each individual to reach around the world farther, faster, deeper, and cheaper than ever before in human history. Friedman further describes globalization as people maintaining the ability to plug, play, compete, share knowledge, and share work easier than ever before, ultimately forcing the world to become closer, tighter, and smaller. Industrialization, starting as early as the 1800s, allowed nations to gain a sense of pride and nationalism, which in particularly affected the Jews in a positive light. Once nations became high on their pride, belief began to emerge that one race was superior to the other, which is identified as racism. Along with this new notion of superiority, ideas of social Darwinism developed. When a race was convinced that they were all around superior, they began seeking anything they could conquer that would make them appear bigger and stronger, also known as imperialism. Thus, these contributing factors conducted the path for a future of fighting that existed in World War I and its following events. World War II in particular was one of the few events at this time which hindered the process of globalization. Beyond this, the Cold War was significant in the development of what exists today. Each event between the 1800s and 2000s has been effective, whether it be positive or negative, in leaving an imprint of its own on history because of the evolving process of globalization. Event after event has forced the Earth's platform to become a little bit more leveled and flattened each time. Between a new era of interconnectedness and interdependence, the world rapidly shrunk from a size medium to a size small. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, maintaining a more leveled platform of equality was a foreign idea until new resources were created, innovations within technology were developed, and new forms of transportation spurred. Industrialization was the process of social and economic change from an agrarian society into an industrial one. The increase in production resulted from the introduction of power-driven machinery, which replaced much of the handwork and the physical labor that existed. Therefore, people's social, political, and economical lives were drastically transformed as a result of the spreading industrialization because machinery took place of an old job on the farm. People were brought closer together based on the new machinery, goods, resources, and their desires and determination to work because of the new opportunities that awaited them. Another contributing factor that herded the people into unison was due to the recently developed forms of transportation, which were possible because of the new resources. The growth of the Industrial Revolution depended primarily upon the industry's ability to transport raw materials and finished goods over long distances. The railway age rapidly began as engineers were constructing steam-driven locomotives. Major effects spurred hastily from this idea of a locomotive because now railroads stimulated industrial growth by giving manufacturers a cheap way to transport materials and complete a product. Additionally, the railroad boom created hundreds of thousands of job opportunities for miners and railroad workers, making traveling much easier. Railroads ultimately encouraged country people to take distant jobs. This strengthened the lower class as their statuses were rising substantially. As the platform continues to flatten, the world slowly spins closer together, tighter and smaller because the interweaving of market technology, information systems, and telecommunication networks. Globalization, nationalism evolved as people were beginning to unify based on their commonalities. Nationalism appeared in two ways: liberal nationalism, which is the desire for freedom, independence, and equality, whereas romantic nationalism is the bond or unification through culture, language, and history. Both instances of nationalism serve as the unifying force that ties people together based on common ideals and ambitions. Thus, these similar ideals contributed greatly to the flattening of the world as nationalism sparked the beginning to a new globalized era. Anti-Semitism and religious persecution circulated Eastern and Western Europe as Jews were forced to become second-class citizens because they did not fit in the mold of the European society. Although Jews were experiencing harsh treatment and anti-Semitism from European countries, they still maintained hope in bettering their circumstances. It was then when the visions of a Jewish homeland arose, becoming ideal in order for the Jews to practice their religion freely, as they too desired a language and land that they could connect to a Jewish state. The driven Theodor Herzl once said, "If you will it, it is no dream." Though Herzl himself was not a romantic nationalist, he didn't merely pose the idea of establishing a Jewish homeland, but rather set out attempting to attain the state. He politically became involved with world leaders and insisted the settlement in Israel, which initiated Zionism during this period. Thus, people from all areas were beginning to merge based on common aspiration and desire, just as the Jews had. The togetherness that existed began bringing people closer together as nationalism was the ultimate turning point in Globalization 2.0 as the world was rapidly decreasing in size. People rapidly grew to be extremely passionate about their country that eventually some believed that one race was more superior to the other, which can be identified as racism. These factors were ultimately what drove the reason for imperialism. The idea of racism evolved into a theory called social Darwinism. In this theory, Charles Darwin's ideas about evolution and natural selection were applied to human society. Any non-European was considered to be on a lower scale of cultural and physical development, because he or she had not made the scientific and technological progress, whereas those who were the fittest for survival enjoyed wealth and success, being classified as superior. Cecile Rhodes concludes, "The Britons are the finest race in the world. It is our duty to seize every opportunity of acquiring more territory." Through this, it becomes evident that the motives that drove imperialism grew out of a strong sense of national pride. Therefore, numerous colonies were determined to plant its flag on much of the world as possible. Evidently, the Europeans desired to maintain more control over colonies, which translated into the land or power they would have possession over. Each piece of land was extremely significant and valuable to the Europeans because the possession of the land signifies power and factors into a nation's national pride. An example of this was the Europeans' ability to conquer, or as the Europeans believed, to civilize Africa. The Europeans' direct rule and control over African nations forced them to assimilate into European culture.